Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, September 27th, 2022. Time for another show. Oh, hey, here comes the bus. That's good news. I think everything is okay on the bus front today. We shouldn't hear any knocks on the door about missing the bus unless he wandered off somewhere. Just keeping you up to date on what the bus situation is here. Welcome back, everybody. Really me, I think, because I don't know how many of the rest of you took the day off yesterday, but I had a brand new show for you yesterday. I felt compelled to record a show. There's just been too many things piling up in Pocket not to take the opportunity to record a show ahead of time. Actually, that happens fairly frequently, but then I get kind of burned out by the time Friday rolls around, and then, well, you know how it is with family time and weekend time. And, okay. Well, anyway, I'm glad I was able to do that for you and get a couple of interesting stories covered rather thoroughly and with it out of the way and without breaks yesterday, too. So you get a reprieve from my now aging little commercial spots reminding you to do dumb stuff like contribute to the show or record a segment for the show so that we can play it on air and give me a 10-minute break, or maybe keep the interest of someone else out there who might want to hear a different voice once in a while, or maybe even wants to hear their own voice. Well, it's a big help, and of course, I always find it interesting because it brings my attention to other stories that I may have missed. Or, of course, you can bring attention to stories that I didn't miss, or that I just got wrong, or missed something, or you just wanted to add something. That's okay, too. We're all okay here today. And anyway, those of you who had the day off, who may have been celebrating Rosh Hashanah, well, Shana Tova to you. And I don't know. Well, we make jokes about writing the date on checks and all that stuff, I guess. It is Tuesday, but Joan McCarter, as I said in the Morning Post, will have life getting in her way today. It's just one of those days where there's stuff to take care of. I wish it was something more exciting, like taking over the world, for instance. That would be pretty good. And apparently the world needs taking over. I have to catch up on this, but Italian elections just finished with, and I guess they elected a fascist to become the new prime minister, so that sounds kind of crappy. I'll have to check in on exactly what's going on there. Italy has, a recurring problem with fascism, I guess, and we'll have to look into this and see what's going on. I think she's a special kind of fascist. Apparently she has some sort of weird relationship with Steve Bannon, which I think is odd. Are we sure, by the way, that Italian military satellites didn't rig this election? Because they are Italian. It would make a lot more sense for the Italian military satellites to have rigged the Italian election than to have rigged ours. And, of course, they failed at rigging ours. But who knows? Maybe, I don't know. Now that makes me think that there's a rigatoni joke in here somewhere. But I'm not even going to look for it at this point. All right. I really do want to catch up on that. Maybe Greg has some insight on that. We'll put it on him to do that. Unless one of you, maybe during the show, has something of great importance that you'd like to share that you think would help redirect us there. But apparently this is a problem everywhere. Of course, we're dealing with our own issues of trying to make sure we avoid electing fascists here in this country. So it's not unfamiliar. It just has a weird, I don't know, there's a weird ring to it. Of course, with Italy, you say, well, they have done this before. Sweden, too, apparently had some recent elections and swung pretty hard to the right, although it's a little more difficult to imagine them, swinging fascist all the way, because they are, after all, there's a fairly strong socialist or social democrat, anyway, tradition there, too. And undoing that, well, similarly, I guess, in Italy as well. I don't know. I'm not a European, I'm just not versed in European politics that way. Not in the way of, certainly not in individual countries. and how they handle their own local politics. It's been probably because it's been relatively stable for so long that it hasn't really captured the notice and attention of Americans who are ordinarily interested in such things, even when it happens in other countries. But something to keep an eye on, that's for sure. And we'll keep an eye out for anything that you might want to throw our way by way of letting us know what's going on. But yeah, we'll have to take a look and see what's going on here. And lots of people sharing. The problem with, of course, sharing the video evidence that this new presumptive prime minister is in fact a fascist, and by showing me the speeches, is that they are in Italian. And yes, they are occasionally translated, and the supposed, that's the problem too, supposed translation appears beneath, but, that's just one of the difficulties of the language barrier. I'm see what's going on here. Now I got myself curious here. Aaron Ginn, I don't know what it is, Ginn, is there co-founder of, where? Get Hydra Host. I don't even know what that's supposed to be, but I'm sure it's great. Mitt Romney, 2012, as a reminder of, I guess, where he came from, and tells me virtually nothing about what's going on here. Anyway, but he is sharing the new Prime Minister of Italy, wow, tweet, along with some video. How long is this video? I'm just 2 minutes and 14 seconds of translated Italian. All right, well, we're not going to get through that. I'm just curious. But now, if you're curious, like I say, now I feel I should never have brought this up, because now I'm bound to put this aside for you to take a look at and see if you, agree with the translation that's going on here. I'm not sure what we're supposed to do with this thing. All right, we better get organized here. It's been a busy day, and or yesterday was a busy day, and I missed much of the news because, well, I was busy, making merry for the new year, which is, it's not a merriness thing necessarily, but I do have a list of things here, some recent work here in pocket that I thought I might share. I think a big hot item this morning so far on Twitter has been that Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is wrapped up in something. He's being sued, a matter of routine. He's the Attorney General in Texas, and when things go awry in Texas and people want to set it right and find themselves in a position to have to sue the state government to do it, Ken Paxton will be served with these papers. But guess what? He's apparently, he's just behaving like a child down there. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton fled his home to avoid being served with a subpoena, a court record says. This comes by way of the Texas Tribune. But the interesting thing is, well, I guess we'll start with the article, and then the commentary afterwards has been kind of interesting too. As the Texas Tribune spread word of this incident, Ken Paxton apparently tried to defend himself on Twitter, and that didn't go very well either. What's happening here? Let's take a look at the Texas Tribune article. As I said, the article's headline: Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton fled his home to avoid a subpoena. In an affidavit, a process server said that the state's top attorney tried to evade him as he attempted to deliver a subpoena from an abortion fund's lawsuit against the state. That's pretty interesting. Why bother, really? Eleanor Klebanoff is the article's author here. Let's get right to the report. Paxton, of course, fled his home in a truck driven by his wife, State Senator Angela Paxton. That's probably not great, but all right, they're a power couple. To avoid being served a subpoena on Monday, according to an affidavit filed in federal court. The whole thing is kind of weird. I mean, sometimes people try to avoid subpoenas when they're being sued in their personal capacity, and but to avoid a lawsuit against the state when you're the attorney general seems kind of weird. But, well, he comes up with a weird explanation. But it's also, a frequent tactic of people who are weird and childish and who say, well, I just want to delay things for a long time. Like, I could see Donald Trump attempting to evade a subpoena just to delay the start of his, of the legal proceedings against him. I mean, you can fight them and dismiss them if you have a case, but, spending time and energy avoiding the subpoena is usually, seems like a waste of time. But anyway, I guess maybe he thought it would thrill the MAGA types if he ducked the subpoena for a while. Anyway, so he fled his home in a truck driven by his wife, State Senator Angela Paxton, to avoid this subpoena. Ernesto Martin Herrera, a process server, was attempting to serve the state's top attorney with a subpoena for a federal court hearing on Tuesday in a lawsuit from nonprofits that want to help Texans pay for abortions out of state. So, okay, now we get some sense of what the suit is about. When Herrera arrived at Paxton's home in McKinney on Monday morning, he told a woman who identified herself as Angela, "Hi, I'm Angela," like that, I guess, that he was trying to deliver legal documents to the Attorney General. She told him that Paxton was on the phone and unable to come to the door. Herrera said he would wait. Like, up to now, pretty normal, except for the fact that you're serving a subpoena on the Attorney General. But okay, I mean, like I said, that does happen in every state. And so, okay, I'll wait. All right. Nearly an hour later, which, you could be on the phone for an hour, a black Chevrolet Tahoe pulled into the driveway, and 20 minutes after that, Ken Paxton exited the house. I walked up the driveway. This is a quote now. I walked up the driveway approaching Mr. Paxton and called him by his name. As soon as he saw me and heard me call his name out, he turned around and ran back inside the house through the same door in the garage, Herrera wrote in a sworn affidavit. Angela Paxton then exited the house, got inside a Chevy truck in the driveway, started it, and opened the doors. A few minutes later, I saw Mr. Paxton ran, it says ran, not run, but ran from the door inside the garage toward the rear door behind the driver's side, Herrera wrote. I approached the truck and loudly called him by his name and stated that I had court documents for him. Mr. Paxton ignored me and kept heading for the truck. Herrera eventually placed the subpoenas on the ground near the truck and told him he was serving him with a subpoena. Both cars drove away, leaving the documents on the ground. On Twitter, the Attorney General said his sudden departure was motivated by concerns for his family's safety. He didn't take any of his family with him, I guess, except his wife. I don't know if he has kids or whatever. But anyway, and how about this response? So it's in the article here. We don't have to go to the Twitter response. They've incorporated it in there. It's clear that the media wants to drum up another controversy involving my work as Attorney General, so they're attacking me for having the audacity to avoid a stranger lingering outside my home and showing concern about the safety and well-being of my family, he wrote in a tweet. That is some kind of an excuse. Interesting. I mean, if the guy is just hanging out there saying, Paxton, I'm here for you. Okay, fine. I mean, but then you would call the police, presumably. You might even, I don't know what the situation is for security provided by the state for the Attorney General of Texas. There may be some, there may not be any. But no calls to the police, no calls for any sort of security, no brandishing of any weapons, no calling out to him, go away or I'll call the police. Just the only things that are being said is, I have a subpoena for you. I'm here as a process server, which is, that's the way these things get served. So, at some point you're going to have to get over it, especially if you are the Attorney General and you can, by dint of your position, expect to be served with such things with some frequency. But no, instead he makes it, they're here to attack my family. Scary. Well, anyway, Paxton has been under indictment for securities fraud for 7 years, by the way, and faces a whistleblower lawsuit from former top deputies who accused him of abuse of office. Paxton has denied wrongdoing, but he should be used to getting subpoenas by now. He was forced into a runoff for the Republican nomination for another term in office after high-profile Republicans, including former Texas Supreme Court Justice Eva Guzman and Land Commissioner George P. Bush, tried to unseat him. But Republican voters chose him over his intra-GOP challengers who criticized his legal and personal scandals on the campaign trail. So apparently it didn't matter too much. Well, in case you think it should matter, or at least this latest episode should matter, he does face Democrat Rochelle Garza in November, and, you could always come out and vote for her or convince your neighbors to do the same. So that's kind of weird. I just thought that was an odd story and an odd tweet in response to it, saying, it was for my safety of my family, you see, which sent me scrambling and running away from a process server. But I was so afraid for my family that I didn't call the police or get a gun or tell them to leave or anything. So, seems pretty lowly and lame, and we'll see whether it develops into something more now, because usually you end up making yourself look like an idiot that lasts for a couple of days instead of simply accepting service of the subpoena and then no one notices anything, and maybe a couple of days later there'll be a article in the paper saying that the abortion group is suing the state. So, your choice. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. By way of catch up and not the condiment, but catching up on things, and also from the Texas Tribune, totally unrelated except for the fact that it is from the Texas Tribune, but it's from the Texas Tribune of 2018 for some reason. Just it happened to fly by in other people's Twitter chatter, but I don't think I ever saw anything. I don't know if I ever saw this stated quite this way, but just in case, because we refer to this every once in a while, mostly as a joke. But you remember the old Jade Helm military exercise that set lunatic Texans on edge because they were pretty sure that it was some sort of, either a coup or an invasion or whatever. It became a running joke for the rest of the country. But in someone else's conversation and in passing, they happened to attach this article from 2018 in the Texas Tribune explaining some of it. Hysteria over Jade Helm exercise in Texas was fueled by Russians, former CIA director says. Wow. I don't know if it's a good guess. I don't know if I ever actually heard it stated. And I don't know whether the statement is true either, but I mean, I don't recall anybody ever pinning it on the Russians. It makes a certain amount of sense, given the timing, etc. And the explanation given is pretty good. Cassandra Pollock and Alex Samuels wrote this piece way back on May 3rd, 2018. The subheader says, Governor Greg Abbott's decision in 2015 to ask the Texas State Guard to monitor a federal military exercise prompted significant criticism. Yes, it did. A former CIA director said Wednesday, now today is Tuesday, but don't get panicky about this. This isn't a time travel thing, except insofar as we're heading back to a Wednesday in May of 2018, or perhaps in late April of 2018. I don't know when that Wednesday fell. Let's look it up if we want the details. If we were preparing for court, we would look it up. Anyway, former CIA director said Wednesday that the move emboldened Russians to next target elections. That's significant. A former director of the CIA and NSA said, way back when, in 2018, that hysteria in Texas over a 2015 U.S. military training exercise called Jade Helm was fueled by Russians wanting to dominate, quote, the information space. And that Texas Governor Greg Abbott's decision to send the Texas State Guard to monitor the operation gave them proof of the power of such misinformation campaigns. It must have been, if true, it must have been regarded as just absolutely hilarious and maybe even a light bulb moment inside the Russian propaganda ministry there, or were they working as the internet, what do they call themselves? The Internet Research Agency. Anyway, that must have been an eye-opener for them. This is the governor of Texas, which I'm sure they regard as like the heart of America, the big state, right, in the middle of the country, and with the cowboy hats and the yada yada, and it just seems so quintessentially American. And you can get the governor of that state to call out the state guard to monitor movements of the actual national armed forces and shadow them because, I don't know, we can make people believe that it's some sort of weird coup or invasion. It's just bizarre, and it must have struck them as amazing. And it's certainly, it's a good theory. Anyway, we'll see what backs it up. Michael Hayden, speaking on MSNBC's Morning Joe podcast, chalked up people's fear of Jade Helm 15 to Russian bots and the American alt-right media that convinced many Texans that Jade Helm was an Obama plan to round up political dissidents. Oh, if only. But, an early emergence of the alt-right that probably, the same sort of sector, I guess, cross-section of people that eventually, I think, probably evolved into the QAnon cult today. Abbott ordered the state guard to monitor the federal exercise soon after news broke of the operation. Hayden said that move gave Russians the go-ahead to continue and possibly expand their efforts to spread fear. At that point, I'm figuring the Russians are saying, we can go big time, Hayden said of Abbott's response. At that point, I think they made the decision, we're going to play in the electoral process. Could be. Sounds like it might be just speculation, but, not terribly off the mark, I would guess. Jade Helm 15 was a planned military training exercise that became a fascination of conspiracy theorists before it even began. The exercise, which spanned several states, began in Texas Bastrop County. I don't know how they pronounce it, but Bastrop, Bastrop, in 2015, and was described by federal officials as routine, but some conspiracy theorists speculated that the exercise was a covert effort to institute martial law. Why not? We'll just start in Bastrop County, or I don't know. Well, you know what? Maybe in 2015 we went through this and maybe even got the pronunciation right, but that's a long time ago. Hayden, by the way, was not CIA director at that time. Weeks before the exercise began, Abbott wrote a letter to the state guard asking them to keep an eye on the operation so, quote, Texans know their safety, constitutional rights, private property rights, and civil liberties will not be infringed, unless I infringe them, of course, which I plan to do later. But that must have been something, and I'm sure panicked Texans everywhere were relieved to know that, the Texas National Guard will save us from the juggernaut of the international campaign to imprison those who oppose Obama. Whatever. Okay. In the letter, Abbott added that he had the utmost respect for the deep patriotism of the brave men and women who put their lives on the line to fight for and defend our freedom. But they might also be fascists taking over for Obama, so watch them closely. Yet the move prompted significant criticism. Democrats questioned whether Abbott really trusted the military. Even some Republicans, including former Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst, spoke out in support of the exercise. Former State Representative Todd Smith accused Abbott of pandering to idiots. I believe former State Representative Todd Smith has got it right there. What's he up to these days? He may be pandering to idiots, so let's not get too excited. Anyway, I think it's okay to question your government. I do it on a pretty regular basis. Former Governor Rick Perry, who at the time of the writing of this article was then U.S. Energy Secretary, and he told the reporters that at the time, the military, that's something else. Question your government, sure. The military, that's something else. It is something else, but you can question that too, but just not, they're taking over through a network of underground tunnels beneath Walmarts to put us all in re-education camps and turn us into Obama bots. I doubt it. The spokesperson for Abbott did not immediately return the Texas Tribune's request for comment way back then, but Democrats then were already seizing on Hayden's remarks to further criticize the governor for calling the state guard to monitor the operation. I certainly would have had I recognized it at the time. Or maybe I did, I don't know. But I feel like I didn't. Anyway, it doesn't take an intelligence expert to see that Trump Republican Greg Abbott calling the Texas National Guard on the U.S. military was downright idiocy. Manny Garcia, the deputy executive director of the Texas Democratic Party, said in a news release, misidentifying the Texas State Guard. Anyway, right, that's true. It's different from the Texas National Guard. I guess it is. I didn't realize what I was saying before, but I thought he was talking about the Texas National Guard, but I guess not. Too many guards they have there in Texas, and really maybe that's part of the problem. Something else to straighten out. Anyway, Abbott still owes the men and women of our armed forces and every single Texan an apology. I guess he probably still does, because I bet that was not forthcoming. Hayden, of course, was CIA director from 2006 to 2009. His allegation isn't the first one connecting Russian misinformation campaigns in Texas. No. There were others. Last year, would have been 2017, federal lawmakers revealed a trove of information from ads purchased on Facebook, including ones showing that 2 Russian Facebook pages managed to organize dueling rallies in front of a Houston mosque in 2016. Yeah, they did have a strange fascination with Texas. Didn't they have one of those where they put together like a Facebook page and in their weird broken English called it like In Love with Shape of Texas or something? They clearly have a fascination with Texas as being representative of the heart of, at least the heart of rural or Midwestern, even though it's not necessarily there, or Republican America. And it may be that, but things may be changing there as well. So, anyways, you never know. All right, well, time for us to take our first break. I just thought that was kind of an interesting way of a little interesting flashback and an interesting way of taking a couple extra jabs at Texas. Sorry, Texas, you're all nice people down there in Texas. I'm sure it's your governor and your attorney general, a little questionable, but and that is your fault. I don't want to let you off the hook just yet. But well, let's put it this way: you got 10 days to think about your repentance for it.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Let's see what else is parked in pocket here. We may make it another catch-up day today. Since the decks are clear, might as well use the time for this. All right, let's see. If Joan were here today, we would probably be talking a little bit about the fact that today being, September 27th, the end of the fiscal year comes this Friday, I guess is the 30th. Is that right? I'm all screwed up because it's Tuesday. We were off yesterday. So let's see. Wednesday's the 28th. Thursday's the 29th. Friday's the 30th. That's all we've got for September. So yeah, end of the fiscal year comes with the end of the day, midnight on Friday. And that means that presumably they're scrambling to get a CR in place in the next couple of days, because, they're only working, generally speaking, they're only working between now and Thursday. But at any rate, not much in the way of predictions of doom, certainly. It's been the consensus to this point, although now it's pretty late, I must say. But it's been the consensus to this point that they would come up with a last-minute solution at a minimum and avoid a shutdown. And in fact, I have before me on my computer screen, in my hand, on computer screen, yes, some tweets from Matt Glassman, whom we have read on the show before, senior fellow at something Georgetown, GAI, and that is Government Affairs Institute at Georgetown University, and formerly a CRS analyst as well, a Senate procedure nerd, and guess how he made it onto the show? Yeah, pretty much all those things. Those are the qualifications that I was looking at. Anyway, he was tweeting late last week that, he said, I'd be very, very surprised if there was a shutdown next week. There may be brinksmanship as actors angle to get what they want on the CR vehicle, but no one seems even remotely willing to actually go for a shutdown or even really credibly threaten it. Well, okay, so far, and I think that's probably true and probably still holds true, but I will say that was the 23rd, and it is the 27th now, and I don't think the path forward is entirely clear. But he goes on to say, and he's quoting someone else here, JB View, that's Jonathan Bernstein on Twitter. Shutdowns only happen when one side wants one is something that Bernstein is fond of saying, and I think he's right. And it's kind of funny, you get what's happening there, the play on the words. Usually it only happens when both sides would want something, but now only when one side wants something, because all it takes is one side to screw something up. And when you're trying to affirmatively secure funding, it's all it takes is for one side to kind of screw things up. At any rate, shutdowns only happen when one side wants one is something that Bernstein is fond of saying, and I think he's right. It's never really the case that you end up in a shutdown through mutual blunder. And right now, no one wants a shutdown, although, we've gotten ourselves in tremendous trouble in the past on the assumption that, no one wants this, and so therefore it won't happen. Everyone wants to avoid it, and that was all true, too. It wasn't even that we were wrong about everybody wanting to avoid it. It was actually the case. It's just that together they, screwed things up. But I guess the mutual blunder is relatively rare, but at any rate, sequestration, super committee, fiscal cliff. We've been through this in 10 different iterations that everybody seeks to avoid this thing. No one has any interest in having this happen, and then it just happens. So I don't know. Maybe each one has subtleties that somebody who is really involved in all of them would be able to weave their way through, thread the needle, and explain how, with tremendous consistency, I can say that each one of those things was a one-off in some way, but I don't know. It just seems to me like the history of this sort of, particularly fiscal brinksmanship, is rife with examples of nobody wants this, and yet it happens. Incidents. All right. So where were we? Shutdowns only happen when one side wants one, which is something Jonathan Bernstein is fond of saying. I think he's right. It's never really the case that you end up in a shutdown through mutual blunder, and right now no one wants a shutdown. But I think sometimes that the Bernstein formulation doesn't specify why no one wants a shutdown right now. In my opinion, in the current scenario, no one wants a shutdown because the downside risk of losing the shutdown politics 5 weeks out from an election overwhelms the potential gain. And that is interesting. Adding to this thread, as it's important, one of his earlier tweets from a different thread saying, in responding to Stephen Dennis, the Capitol Hill reporter, but in the Stephen Dennis's point is an important one. I guess we'll have to go see what it was. The incentives of the parties to avoid shutdown don't perfectly overlap with the individual incentives of senators. There may well be individuals who would benefit from forcing a short lapse, and if they could, an actual shutdown. That's interesting too. What's he responding to? Let's see. This is, it's interesting. It's a sub-thread of this one because it leads back to the same thing we were talking about before. same thread. And Stephen Dennis is responding to his tweet where he's saying, sometimes I think the Bernstein formulation doesn't specify why no one wants a shutdown right now, and the downside overwhelming any potential gain. Stephen Dennis saying, it only takes one senator, and we've seen it before. That's true, too. And Jonathan Bernstein jumps in here and says, yes, the precise thing I say when I'm being careful is that the extended shutdowns, more than a long weekend, only happen when one side, with the votes to make it happen, want one. One senator can sometimes force a shutdown, but not for very long. That's certainly true. And we do have those occasional long weekend accidental almost shutdowns. And they let those slide because the government shut down over the weekend when most things weren't happening and most people weren't paying attention anyway. And then they reopened Monday or Tuesday or something like that. All right. One senator can force a lapse in appropriations, Glassman notes, for a period of hours or a day. I don't think one senator has ever forced the actual executive branch implementation of shutdown orders. And yes, I'm talking about extended shutdowns, not the 1 day or 3 hour Rand Paul lapses. True. Those do happen as well. But that's when we circle back around here. The Stephen Dennis's point is an important one. The incentives of the parties to avoid shutdowns don't perfectly overlap with individual senator incentives. Now that makes more sense. Now there's some examples that they're talking about. And Bernstein, they're not done. Bernstein chimes back in. Also a good reminder that individual senators like D'Amato, going way back, Bunning, and Paul all absolutely love a good talking filibuster. But also that McConnell has apparently been very careful not to risk the future of the filibuster by using it to force a shutdown or a default. Stephen Dennis responding here. It also tends to be bad politics, all other things being equal. Shutdowns more likely a year away from an election rather than right before them. And, I'd have to agree. Okay. Well, that's interesting. And, we'll include that again in the roundup, but just a warning that that's still out there, still looming. They may be working as we speak towards a short-term CR at the very least to kick the can forward, to give them more time to negotiate if they haven't worked things out. But I did see some reporting today that I guess the pipeline deal and the exploration deal and who knows what else is wrapped up in this thing is set for my least favorite term. Someone reporting on it being set for a test vote today, which I assume means a cloture vote on something, whether it's on the motion to proceed. I don't know if they're going up the works all the way to that, or whether it's to go to, I don't think would be final passage because I don't think that they've been debating the actual language of the bill yet. But I do hate that terminology, the test vote. And I think it would be worth pointing out what the vote is actually about, just to highlight the absurdity of the whole thing. I don't know whether they think test vote, I don't know whether it just avoids explaining the whole thing or it makes it sound like they're somehow more organized and together than they really are. We're going to have a test vote. Like, I don't know why anybody would think that a test vote would be a thing that adults would need. You know, there's 100 of you. Well, we're going to have a test vote to see whether we understand what voting is and do we know what our positions are. And then we can practice it. And then we can have a real vote. But it's usually what they mean is it's a vote on like the cloture motion on the motion to proceed. And they feel silly writing in a newspaper that they're voting on the question of whether or not to close debate on the question of whether or not to begin debate on the bill. But I think it makes sense to tell people that. I mean, it does seem dumb, but the Senate is dumb, and you should say it. And you should say exactly what's going on. I mean, it's not that much dumber than saying they're having a test vote, which I don't know. I guess I don't know. I don't know why they think that makes it sound like it's better. And maybe it does sound better. And people are just like, I guess, let it roll off their back. I don't know exactly what that means, a test vote. But okay, it's a vote, and they're testing out how they're going to vote on it. In other words, it means they're going to vote on this for real a couple days from now. And now they're just sort of voting to sort of practice and see where they are. How many votes do we expect we can really get on the real vote later on? Except, like, that's a dumb practice. Why would you do that? And again, there's 100 of you. Get together, have a meeting, figure out how many people are going to vote for this and how many people are going to vote for that. It's not hard to do if you talk to one another. And they don't talk to one another all the time. So, I understand that part, but I don't know. I think caping for them, I guess that would be using the terminology. I don't use that as a verb very often. But that's kind of what's going on there, is covering for the stupidity and stilted procedure of the Senate by making it sound like inventing new terminology that kids on a playground might be able to understand. Test vote. All right. Well, anyway, I oppose that usage, and that's why. Want to switch subjects? There's many ways to do it. Interesting. Infuriating, distraction. Which way do you want to go? Let's try the interesting first, because, we're trying to engage you in this show here. I saw this go by on Twitter the other day, and hey, it looked kind of interesting and looked like it might even serve the purpose of confirming my priors here, which is always a good thing to do. Good way to get yourself on the show here. What am I reading? I don't know if I can pronounce what I'm reading. What even is it? I don't know. It's some sort of international, news reporting and analysis going on here. And it's about Ukraine / Russia / I don't know what, I guess I would say, the mobocracy in Russia, I suppose. But I'm reading, oh my goodness, how am I going to say this? Hromadski International. Is that what we'll say? And how do you find it? I couldn't tell you. What does this even mean? en.hromadski.ua. I don't even know. What is UA? I'm not sure. Is that Ukraine? I got no idea. Anyway, I don't know what the EN is. And Hromadski is HROMADSKE. You got that? HROMAD, Romad, SKE, ski. International. The international is not in the URL. What is it? I don't know. Now I'm curious. I'll click on their, masthead and see if I can get some information about what the hell is up. Does it say like who they are, what they are? No, it just says, maybe over here in the menu here. No, not really. There we are. About. I'm just curious now. Hromadski International brings together high quality journalism. Oh, good. I like the high quality stuff. New media tools. I'm not crazy about those. And objective analysis. That I don't believe in. In one place, Hromadski is a vibrant startup. Excellent. You can have all my money now. Founded by a unique team of Ukrainian, there we are, and foreign journalists. With the launch of Hromadski International in 2014, get with it. I didn't even realize these guys are almost 10 years old. The network now broadcasts in Ukrainian, no help to me, English, thank you, and Russian. Nah, no use. Okay. By the way, just a little bit more from their About Us section. Hromadski is here to fill the huge gap we've spotted in Ukrainian and Eastern European news. So, okay, pretty good. I get the idea now. We'll see whether we deem them a trustworthy source or not, but that's yet to come. Anyway, we know our perspective here. This I thought was interesting. The headline is a quote here, and I guess, the quote is, "Don't call Russians military." What do you mean? Don't call Russians military. They're just a horde of bad people. Now that's a technical term. Horde of bad people. That a quote from military expert John Spencer. Whose military expert is he? I don't know. Ours? Maybe. The article explains. What's going on here? I think what I'm guessing here, just from the headline alone and then the photo illustrating it. The photo, by the way, is why they use this one to illustrate it, I'm not sure. It's a Ukrainian serviceman. Actually, I would have thought if this had been a Russian person, it would have explained things a lot better. But Ukrainian serviceman takes a selfie while firing from an artillery system on the front line in Donetsk Oblast in September. I thought they were trying to illustrate, this is not a professional military that the Russians have sent against us. It's just, like I said, a horde of bad people, some sort of cross between the actual Russian military and some mercenary forces and some maybe street gang type forces, all mixed into one, like you saw in Syria not that long ago. And that they would be the sort of person who would do things like take selfies while they're firing their artillery because they're not a disciplined and trained professional military. But I guess neither is the Ukrainian one, and I don't know why they chose to use that, but or to identify it that way. If they, it would have been better for them to be dishonest, I guess, and say, no, it's really a Russian doing this. Anyway, now let's see if we can unravel the mystery. When Ukraine launched a surprise successful operation in Kharkiv Oblast, John Spencer, an urban warfare expert, called it the greatest counteroffensive in modern history. Aha. By the way, does this have a byline anywhere here? I don't think so. It just gets attributed to Romadsky International. Spencer served in the U.S. Army, there we go, for over 25 years and is a retired major with combat experience in Iraq. He has extensive experience in the Strategic Studies Group of the U.S. Defense Department, worked at the elite U.S. Military Academy at West Point and the Pentagon, and taught and researched military affairs at the United States Military Academy, which I believe we just referenced moments ago. But I guess people for whom Ukrainian is the first language, not English, but pretty good. I mean, I get nowhere in Ukrainian, certainly, but some of the fine points, I guess, they could use some work on. But couldn't we all? It's very good. It's native English in that sense. Anyway, he is the author of the Mini Manual for the Urban Defender. He closely follows the war in Ukraine and believes that urban defense plays a key role. Well, you would think it would have to, as they are defending urban areas. Anyway, in June, Major Spencer came to Kyiv to see with his own eyes how a small Ukrainian army was able to stop the offensive of the second largest in the world. Romadsky spoke to John Spencer, a retired U.S. Army major. Remember him, like a paragraph away? We said that before. And the chair of the Urban Warfare Studies with the Madison Policy Forum, about how the battles for the cities have influenced the course of the Russo-Ukrainian War and how and when it may end. Now, it doesn't look at this point like they're getting back anytime soon to the headline, but let's see. See what's going on here. It's in interview form. I think Kherson will be liberated very soon is the section title. He's first asked, you praised the Kharkiv counteroffensive. Why do you think it was successful? Which may be of some interest, but I guess I kind of want to find out what's the story with that headline and what does he mean by it. But I guess we'll build our way there by reading the rest of the give and take here. You praised the Kharkiv counteroffensive. Why do you think it was so successful? I think it was so successful just because the Ukrainian military is a better military. Well, okay, it's not very insightful, but there are military reasons about having better intelligence, having better speed, ability to move faster, but really you have to give credit to Ukrainian soldiers who are just better at discipline about initiative. Except that they take selfies of themselves. In the military, we say that a unit that can understand what they're fighting for and can understand what the mission is, they'll do great things on the battlefield. But clearly, this was a massive operation that was coordinated at the general staff through a lot of work, but it was the actual ground soldier that accomplishes such great things. Some military analysts attributed this success to a disinformation campaign, says the interviewer. The Russians expected the counteroffensive in the south, as the Ukrainian officials announced, and didn't prepare themselves to defend Kharkiv Oblast. Is it only about misguiding the Russians? Could you talk a little bit more about the tactical level as well? The answer here, sure, deception is always important in war. For thousands of years, some of these things never change. Some people are trying to say that the offensive in Kherson was a feint. I personally don't think so. The offensive out in Kherson, is a real major offensive to liberate Kherson from Russian occupiers. To deliberate, obviously I think they mean just liberate Kherson from Russian occupiers. And it's been going on for weeks and weeks with the use of long-range munitions to take out bridges, to hit Russia and ammunition supplies, even striking capabilities in Russian-occupied Crimea. The Russians had responded to that offensive, but what they did was they rushed everything that they could and left themselves vulnerable in the Kharkiv offensive. Okay. Now, only the Ukrainian general staff could tell you whether that was the plan. To me, it doesn't really matter. It was the fact that Russia left itself very vulnerable, and the Ukrainians had the superior capability to identify that they were extremely vulnerable on that front, and to push, not just a little bit, but hundreds of kilometers, because the Russians left such weak forces who didn't fight. And I actually think that surprised even the Ukrainians that the Russians didn't even try to fight. They just ran. Russians made a bad decision. Ukraine responded. Either they planned it that way or they just responded quicker and took advantage of that. And now they have so many Russian weapons that they've captured, and they've liberated so many of the villages and have dealt Russia a massive blow to their ability to continue to stay in Ukraine. All right, well, it's a good update anyway, if nothing else. Interviewer then asks, how can the Ukrainian military use this success further? I mean, it says furthermore, but I guess further. What's next? I think Ukraine is using this to their success, but there's a lot of work to be done, even if in the new areas that have been reoccupied. I don't even know exactly what he means by reoccupied. This reads a little bit like he was asked questions in Ukrainian. They translated them the best they could to English, that he answered in English, that they translated it to Ukrainian, wrote the article, and then translated it back into English in order to print it in the English version of Ramadsky. But maybe not. Maybe everybody's garbled here. Not everybody is, super eloquent, even if they're a major in the U.S. Armed Forces. But anyway, I think Ukraine is using this to their success. Good example there. But there's a lot of work to be done even in the new areas that have been reoccupied by Ukrainians, or what? I guess so. But that's liberated, not reoccupied. Anyway, we're discovering all the horrors that happen when Russians occupied Ukrainian land and what they do to the civilians, into the infrastructure. And really to the infrastructure. Ukraine will reestablish its lines and continue to push the offense there. I thought he was going to say offensive, but there's no IVE. I don't think this war goes for years. I think this war goes for months. Goes on for, Ukraine will have to reestablish its lines, resupply the soldiers, and get ready for the next operation. As they continue to fill out this, I think Kherson will be liberated very soon. They, as I had to make sure, can keep the gains they've had because Russia will respond. But Russia's days are numbered. They don't have anything else of substance they can send to Ukraine. I mean, they're asking North Korea for artillery rounds and asking Iran for drones. They are desperate, but they are still dangerous. So, Ukraine has to be very careful about their next steps to this ultimate victory. And a good point there, one being made in all sorts of ways. And yeah, we do have to catch up on the unrest that Putin has unleashed inside Russia in trying to conscript troops for this misadventure. And it's definitely threatening his grasp on power. And it made me wonder whether whether it will eventually be right about Putin being toppled by the I can't remember the name of the group, but Joan knows it. See if she had been here today, she knew it offhand. But the Committee of Mothers of Soldiers, or Committee of Soldiers' Mothers, or however they put it there, who were so influential in the past have been very influential in forcing openness about people who were lost in the Afghanistan war, etc., but who might find, unfortunately for them, that they've got a base for organizing again as people are lost in Ukraine, or people seek to prevent losing more of their sons in Ukraine. And people now setting recruiting stations on fire. There's all sorts of unrest all over the place. It's, in a mobocracy, I guess, if you're just, costing people too much and people aren't earning, they rise up against you sometimes. That's what it's all about. Anyway, let's see. The next section we'll read for a minute or so before we take our next break. What if they mobilize troops in Russia? And that's marked with an asterisk. So we'll see what that's about, perhaps, maybe later on. The answer, that is a big question for military analysts if Russia calls for a national mobilization. And now they have, of course. Most of us believe that's just not possible. I mean, possible to call, just not possible to fulfill it, I guess. One is the embarrassment that it would cause Russia if they call for a national mobilization. Oh, he's really talking about the call. Wow. And the men don't show up because they're already having problems just filling their normal conscript numbers. It would also go against their entire messaging about the special military operation in Ukraine. To mobilize the entire country, they would have to say this is a threat against Russia. It's not. This is about defending Ukraine, and Ukraine will stop at Ukraine's sovereign line. I assume so, too. So there are lots of reasons why they can't or why they won't, so I think it's highly unlikely. But let's say they did, and this is what they're doing. They're taking people who have no training. They're taking prisoners out of prison and sending them to the front lines to die. So if Russia wants to send more soldiers to the front lines to die for a cause that is not theirs, and that would be this one, then go ahead. I mean, I guess that's the American perspective. Anyway, I don't think that'll change the ultimate victory for Ukraine. Okay, just a little bit more, perhaps. You mentioned weapons. Do you think Ukraine can win this war without long-range missiles if they won't be provided? That's an interesting question. I don't know if that was in the offing. There's definitely a variety of long-range missiles, and I guess that is at the center of the question. What will be the type they're looking for? Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and almost as if on cue, just a random tweet sent forward into my timeline of a Russian man. It says, Russian man who has been mobilized says he has been told that they will be sent to fight the Ukrainian army in Kherson in 2 days without having received any military training. That's according to, I guess, the translation of this video that's attached. I doubt he's speaking in English, but I'm not certain about that. But, yeah, I mean, that's about what everybody expected, and what the prediction has been. So I don't know. Do I include this thing? I mean, it's not a particularly informative tweet necessarily, but I'll open it up in the browser and have it around and collect it come links time and see. Well, here he is saying they've been officially informed in their tank regiment that they're going to Kherson, even though, now that's really difficult. I mean, it's one thing, it's stupid and dangerous and likely ineffective to send infantry untrained. But if you're sending tank divisions untrained, like how do you drive this thing, that will be no good. I mean, that's just my prediction as a military expert. I predict that sending people who don't know how to drive tanks to drive the tanks and conduct the combat in those tanks will be unsuccessful. Thank you. Nobel Prize for me now. All right, so where were we? The question of weapons and whether Ukraine can win this war without long-range missiles if they won't be provided. And why wouldn't they be provided? And the answer, I guess, comes back in the form of the question, what kind of missiles do you mean here? The answer, there's definitely a variety of long-range missiles. Can Ukraine win this war without some of the longer-range missiles they've asked for? Yes, absolutely they can. But if the Western world, the free world, wants the war in Ukraine to end faster, Yeah. Then they would provide Ukraine with all the weapons that are necessary, like the long-range weapons that can shoot over 300 kilometers and more vehicles and all that. And I imagine that the hesitation there is, as we just read in the paragraph before, well, you know, the Russians will likely be unsuccessful with their mobilization because it has to be seen. That'll make it seem like the Russian government is saying that the war in Ukraine is a threat to the Russian homeland. But everyone knows that the Ukrainians will simply, you know, are simply looking to liberate their own territory and will stop at their own border if they manage to push the Russians all the way back out of what was Ukraine before they invaded. Then they would just stop. But of course, then if you're arming them with longer range missiles that can shoot over 300 kilometers, then and then even if they get close to their borders, then you're basically saying, yeah, it actually, they can reach the Russian homeland, even if that's never their intention. I don't know how, I don't know. And of course, in order to really, and if they're really going to shorten the war, they would have to hit Russian supply lines and military columns while they were making their way to Ukraine, not just in Ukraine. And once munitions start raining down, you know, they've hit a couple of targets inside Russia proper, and it makes a big splash. But it also gives them the opportunity to propagandize on that, the Russians, that is, and say, this is an attack on the Russian homeland. I don't know how effective that will be. Anyway, next question from the interviewers was, why does the U.S. hesitate to provide it? Oh, you mean there's an actual answer? I could just read that. Might not be the right answer, but it's a major's answer, and I'm not anything. So let's see. I don't have an insider view to the political negotiations. Every country that provides aid is a risk decision on the idea of escalating the situation in the geopolitical row. I'm not privy to that. Maybe it's a concern since Russia said if you provide this, that will escalate the war. But that's a bully, you know, rattling his nuclear saber. I think that's a form of appeasement not to provide Ukraine with those weapons. Well, okay. I mean, I see where this answer is going, and I think you have to have that discussion. You'd have that answer the way I was answering it before, which is, yeah, you know, if you give long-range missiles to the Ukrainians that they can fire into Russia proper, that's going to bolster the Russians' propaganda case that this is a war of aggression by the Ukrainians. It's going to be difficult to explain why they need, you know, I mean, there is an explanation, but it's going to be difficult to explain to people who the bombs are raining down on, are not going to be very interested in the explanation, why the rest of the world is arming the Ukrainians with missiles that can fire 300 kilometers into Russia to liberate Ukraine. You see? Anyway, I think he's either being willfully blind or just disingenuous about this to answer it this way. But anyway, he says, I think that's a form of appeasement to not to provide Ukraine with those weapons. There's one argument about it would give, there's one argument about it would give Ukraine the ability to hit targets inside of Russia, there we are, and escalate to a greater war in Europe. I think that's just a silly argument because Ukraine can range Russia from the Kharkiv region with mortar rounds, which I understand. Okay, yes, that's true, and that's the case. But so then what's the issue? Well, we need things that can fire 300 kilometers into Russia. Why? Well, so that we can stop supply lines in Russia. Well, but you just said you can fire into Russia now. Yes, but not 300 kilometers. I know. And when we make it so, I mean, if you're able to lob mortars from a border region over the border, I mean, I think everybody understands that you can do that. It's not going to work as an escalation threat. The same way as, well, we can fire completely over this Russian province into a non-border region and just rain fire 300 kilometers into Russia. You don't think that changes the calculus? I mean, that's just not a real analysis. I mean, I guess he's just, you know, He's military and he wants the, military solution to this stuff. But yeah, the reason he's not privy to the political negotiations is he doesn't appear to, understand them very well or want to. So I think he likes to analyze it from the purely military perspective. It seems pretty obvious to me. But no, he thinks it's a silly argument. And really, he says, I think of a form of appeasement to Putin, not to anger him, which is a real thing. You actually do have to threaten, worry about doing that. He, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, not only the range, but I think the fact that you're talking about actual, missiles versus mortars, it's a lot easier to, like I said, to propagandize on and to say that this needs to be responded to possibly with nuclear weapons by the Russians. I mean, I don't advocate it, but you could easily see him going that direction when the weapons are missiles versus mortars, even if they're not nuclear tipped. But okay. Anyway, where were we here? This has always been about Ukraine defending its land with soldiers, and all they've asked for is the weapons, and they got them. Just not every weapon that's available in the world. And they've shown that they will use those weapons responsibly because they have weapons that will reach really far out, that they could reach Russia, and they're not the ones attacking civilian locations, hospitals, nurseries, theaters. So I fully support giving Ukraine any weapons it needs, and it won't escalate the war. Well, you don't know that. I actually think that it probably will. And if they can already reach all the way into Russian territory, then what do you need the missiles for? I could see it very easily being part of the argument. And they're not the ones attacking civilian locations now, and they may never be the ones attacking civilian locations. But if they have the capability of firing that deep into Russia, then either, one, mistakes can be made, or two, propaganda and sabotage games can be played. Can the Russians blow something up that's real and say that the Ukrainians did it? Can they stage something that's fake and say the Ukrainians did it? How can the Ukrainians be responsible for the destruction of this children's hospital 300 kilometers inside Russia? You know that they didn't do that. They don't have the capability for that. Yes, they do. Look here. The United States gave them these missiles and said they would use them responsibly, but look what happened. We don't know whether it was a mistake or it was intentional, but it did happen. It may not have happened, but Russian propaganda about it becomes that much more effective if it's also well known that we have given them the ability to do that. So, yeah, I don't know. All they've asked for is the weapons. Well, there's plenty of weapons that they can have. Whether or not they have to be missiles, I don't know. Anyway, let's move on. I think here is where we get to why I came to the article. The headline was promising some more discussion of this. Section 2 here, Russians use war crimes as a form of warfare. Let's talk about urban warfare. How has this war contributed to the understanding of urban warfare? He's supposed to be the big expert. So what's the answer? I think this war has proved what many have known, is that war is about urban areas. Every battle that's happened in Ukraine since day one, since the Battle of Kiev, Sumy, and Kharkiv, has been about Russia's interest in grabbing urban terrain, because urban terrain is the economic engine of nations. Urban areas are the logistical hubs for maneuvering supplies around the country. I say that all roads lead to urban. Ukraine, that's true. The only reason that they build roads through rural areas is to access urban areas. Isn't that basically probably true? It's either a national plan to connect urban centers for car and truck traffic, or at the very least, an effort to facilitate the movement of agricultural goods out of the rural areas and into the cities where they sell. So, sure, all roads do lead to urban, whatever that's supposed to mean. Ukraine has shown the world that militaries must be able to defend urban terrain and also conduct operations to liberate urban terrain from enemy occupiers. And in this war specifically, is that sometimes it isn't always about destroying an enemy as it is about protecting the fighting for control of cities which make up a country, share the root with civilizations. They are the people. Gosh, I hope this has been translated 15 times, because otherwise it's garbled, but I think we can discern a message from it. So the different battles for Ukrainian cities have shown at the strategic, operational, and tactical level that it's very important for militaries to be able to fight in, for, and defend urban areas. I would say, or urban terrain. That's almost like a duh level response, but there it is. It has some gobbledygook in it, so it becomes a paragraph. Could you speak more about different approaches? I mean, how different are Russia's and Ukraine's approaches when it comes to defending urban areas? All right. There are some differences here because Ukraine is fighting a just war and using all the laws of armed conflict and following all the rules on how to conduct the warfare and taking selfies. Russia wants a war of attrition. Russia wants the Ukrainian military to come out and fight them on the field of battle so they can be blown up with artillery. Russia wants to seize the urban terrain so they can destroy, loot, take all the resources, and control the urban terrain. The difference in the way they fight for it, though, is that Russia, like in battles such as Mariupol and, oh my goodness, here we have to try this again, Severodonetsk, will not follow the laws of armed conflict about how to fight an urban terrain, about protecting civilians, protecting civilian objects and protected locations. They will literally just conduct bombings in front of their forces as they try to maneuver for, where Ukraine has shown 100%, whether they're defending or they're trying to liberate urban terrain, they're all only fire at military targets. Ugh. But okay, you understand the underlying message? When Russia takes a piece of urban terrain, it's usually 80 to 100% destroyed, so it's nothing left. So it doesn't liberate anything, it literally destroys everything. All right, point taken. I don't know if it was the point they were looking for. Interviewer question here. Would it be fair to say that the Russian strategy hasn't changed since World War II? As an expert, could you compare, for example, the Battle of Berlin and the Siege of Mariupol? Does Russia still use the same strategy? That's an interesting question. There are some differences. Russia decided to build its military in a certain way, but absolutely there are still practices that are left over from how they treat their soldiers, how they educate their soldiers, which then reflects into the way they fight. Their system is just weaker, and they put soldiers into a foreign country and they do bad things. But the laws of war have also changed since World War II. Things like never again that should have meaning to everybody in the world. Yeah, but I mean, never again is usually, talking about not the war effort per se, and certainly not the Russian war effort. It was the German war effort and the Holocaust, which is only tangentially connected to the actual combat efforts. I guess except to the extent to which they were used as slave labor to make munitions. But it seems like a bad reference. Anyway, there are some similarities to the Battle of Berlin or even the battles in Chechnya or Grozny, where they are fully willing to destroy everything rather than fight the enemy in the urban terrain, which is legitimately, by definition, a war crime, where they're not distinguishing between military targets and civilians. They actually use war crimes as a form of warfare, and I personally believe on purpose. But they actually fight more like the Nazis than they did They actually fight more like the Nazis than they did do the Soviets in World War II. I think they're saying actually fight more like the Nazis did than the Soviets did in World War II in their use of genocidal practices, purposely causing humanitarian crisis just to give them advantages. But as a military guy, it makes me angry to even call them a military. This is what I came for here. They're not really a military. They're just a horde of bad people doing bad things. A military will operate with a code with an ethical framework. It fights for its nation under its nation's values. What Russia has sent into Ukraine is just a horde of bad people. Stay alive by killing anybody who's trying to kill you and do whatever it takes to do it, I guess. That's not, part of his answer, but I think that's what he's trying to describe here. Some military experts say that Ukrainian small units are better trained for close combat when it comes to urban terrain. Do you agree with this? It's kind of a boring question, but interesting. And that's it so this is a sort of mistitled thing here, but I was hoping that he would discuss more about the composition of the Russian military and the mobocracy behind what passes for the government of Russia. But I guess that's not to be. But still, it is interesting for its military analysis, even if it's in garbled syntax. So what about this? Ukrainian small units better trained for close combat when it comes to urban terrain? Probably small, probably better, more nimble in urban context. And of course, the Russians don't really care about preserving the integrity of the urban area. They just want to conquer it. Although, that does tend to diminish the economic gains that might come from gaining control of an urban center, whereas Ukrainians are probably hoping to liberate but preserve as much as possible. So what's his answer? Are they better at close combat? Yes, 100%. He says, so all fighting is that small unit level. That's where the battles are won or lost. And it starts with the framework of how you built your military before you even started training it. That they're fighting for a just cause. They're a cohesive group. They trust their leaders at all levels. And then that translates to being trained to fight as a group on the specifics of urban warfare, which are unique. But everything I'm seeing is that the Ukrainians are better led. I'm going to just change it on the fly the best I can. I'm going to normalize this speech. A better motivated and better trained military at both the small unit level, but even at the large scale level. If you look at operations happening now for urban areas, it isn't that Ukraine is just surrounding urban areas and then going in and attacking. They're fighting smarter. They're outthinking Russian forces, even at the lowest level. And that can only be done because the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian president, everybody trusts the soldiers. I'm not certain that that's necessarily true, but I'm sure it's true to a larger extent than it is with conscripts who don't know what they're doing there and are losing and just probably feel that they should never have been there in the first place. Why did Russia fail to capture Kyiv and succeed in Mariupol? Well, each urban battle is different. The terrain is different. The military situation is different in their capabilities. I went to Kyiv in June and toured all the locations, Bucha, Ipin, Brovary, Ivankiv, to understand how small Ukrainian forces defeated Russia in the Battle of Kyiv and saved Ukraine, because if Kyiv would have fallen, yes, the Ukrainians would never stop fighting, but the Russians would be in the capital. The difference with Mariupol is that the Russians had the capability to send more and more forces into the area. So at one point, they had 20,000 Russians going against the brave Mariupol defenders, but they still held out for 80 plus days, and it's literally an amazing historical battle, but the terrain was very different. In Kyiv, with its such a big area, the Russians sent such a small force, and once they were defeated in the Hostomel airport, they couldn't get more forces in there quickly without being attacked as they were moving into positions. In Mariupol, they were coming out of secure areas. They were able to maneuver more forces, and Ukraine was able to drop the bridges, raise the rivers, and the Ukrainian civilians were able to support the Ukrainian military, and Ukraine was able to resupply, and other units were going to be able to get there, like the airborne and other divisions. That was one long sentence about 20 different things. So, there's lots of differences, but the bravery of the Ukrainian people will highlight in both battles. Boy, oh boy. And I think the Battle of Kyiv was the greatest military defeat of modern history because Russia was not able to achieve its goal of removing the Ukrainian government from the capital. And as an 8th grader, I would give you a decent grade on that essay, but okay. As a major in the military, I don't know. Military books would say that an attacking force should outnumber defendants at the tactical level by a ratio of 1 to 3, which we would normally express as 3 to 1. I mean, it's a basic rule. Why didn't they follow it? That's the question. The basic rule is really for open terrain, and as an urban warfare guy, those ratios change. You need 5 to 1. And that's what we eventually saw in Mariupol, right? They had 20,000 to 3,000. So they actually achieved the ratio. Why didn't they do that in Kyiv? I think that's because they thought that the Ukrainian people in the military would not fight. They thought they could rapidly get into the capital and they didn't have to surround it and clear it. And maybe they thought they wouldn't even fight. They would just drive in like a military prey, P-R-E-Y, which is ironical. What happened in the first battle of Grozny, they thought they would just drive in and nobody would fight. But what they found is they weren't welcomed with flowers and welcomed with bullets and RPGs and just a stiff resistance. Their entire plan was backed by faulty intelligence about the Ukrainian people, even their military. I mean, there were just so many errors that were made, but from an urban warfare perspective, they didn't bring the right formations and they weren't prepared for the fight. Blah. Well, I'm glad this is finally coming to an end here. And finally, how will the war end? Okay. Without question, this war will end in Ukrainian victory. All sovereign Ukrainian land being liberated. And the Russian military being back in Russia. It ends with a stronger Ukraine that's ever existed in history. Phew. The Ukrainian people as a whole have shown the world that they will be free and that they are strong. They're willing to fight for their freedom. It's an amazing world story. NATO will be stronger than it's ever been since it was created because of Ukraine, because we understand Russia is a threat to the world. It's not created because of Ukraine, but okay. But this ends in a complete Ukrainian victory, which I'm sure the people at Ukrainian published Hromadski were more than pleased to print. All right. Well, I feel like, that's too bad. I feel like we got a little bit of insight, but mostly the insight was into how poor the writing is, at this level. I mean, again, it's not their first language, English, and so you gotta forgive them for all of that. But now I have big questions about, did this American major answer in English? Did it get translated to Ukrainian and back into English? Why is this not in the original English? And if it is, how bad is that? Like, that's horrific. But I don't know. Maybe it's reconstructed from notes and recordings, and it's done in this Ukrainian guy's English. So it wasn't very helpful in terms of, well, it was very difficult to read through. But I wanted more about that. Don't call the Russians military. They're just a horde of bad people. It's an explosive headline. That's true. And I guess I should have been tipped off by the fact that they illustrated it with what I think is a picture of, poor performance in the field, taking a selfie while you're firing your artillery. That just seemed like, I thought that was going to be a Russian soldier and that these guys are untrained and don't know what they're doing and don't particularly care. And, sometimes, in some cases, aren't even military themselves, but are essentially gang members who've been handed military equipment from the piles of surplus in Russia and sent to Ukraine. So we'll have to find that reporting elsewhere, which I believe exists, but which I have not seen. I haven't been able to collect just yet. I don't know. I think I'm speculating at this point, but I think it comes from bits and pieces of reports in the field that hint that a more comprehensive story about the composition of the Russian army is yet to come. Okay. Well, I feel a little bit, like I got taken for a ride on that particular piece, but I don't know. It's too bad. I guess I should have guessed ahead of time that might have been the case. All right. Now back to the Washington Post Well, look at that. Our next break is coming up after all. Well, we'll be heading back to American written sources, which I think will at least eliminate the stumbling over the writing next time. I got to catch up on a couple other issues, and there are a few other long-ish reads that I even wanted to include in Monday's show and still ran out of time for, even though I had 2 full hours to empty pocket at that point. Still more to go. Let's see. We got all sorts of fun information that's been sitting around about other names that might bubble up in the January 6th investigations. Now that they are set to start with their public hearings again, perhaps now is a good time to get prepared on that. And of course, you will have heard the lousy news about the Matt Gaetz case and see where that's going next. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Yes, we do have the bad news that I see carried by the Washington Post about the Matt Gaetz case. Just trying to get a handle on what the hell's going on there. I think they should shut all of that down until they can figure out what the hell's going on over there. Career prosecutors at the DOJ, presumably, recommend no charges for Gaetz in sex trafficking probe, which will be regarded as a major victory for him, and I don't see how else you could look at it. Investigators see credibility challenges for 2 main witnesses in a probe of the congressman's alleged past dealings with a then 17-year-old. Reported here by Devlin Barrett. And I guess we can gather from the headline that, one of the difficulties with prosecuting him for his sex trafficking is that all the witnesses against him would be sex traffickers. And that makes things difficult. But that does sound like, pretty routine for how you'd have to handle things in most such criminal investigations. It's just that, I guess they're probably right that it would be a difficult thing when you get in front of a jury to say, well, United States congressman, and his word versus a bunch of convicted sex traffickers who, of course, the defense will point out made deals to get more lenient sentencing in order to cooperate, et cetera, et cetera. They did, but that's kind of a routine thing. And who cares that he's a United States congressman? That shouldn't mean anything. In no other context would you think, oh, well, obviously that means he's telling the truth. Except here, all of a sudden, when it's most important that you be clear about what he is and who he is and what he's done. All right. Well, anyway, we'll leave the editorializing for a little bit later, or at least later in the article when we can't help it anymore. So here's the straight reporting. Career prosecutors have recommended against charging Representative Matt Gaetz, Republican of Florida, in a long-running sex trafficking investigation, telling Justice Department superiors that a conviction is unlikely in part because of credibility questions with the 2 central witnesses, according to people familiar with the matter. Senior department officials have not made a final decision on whether to charge Gaetz, so it's possible, but it is rare for such advice to be rejected. These people told the Washington Post, speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss the deliberations. And to be fair, you can be sure that had career prosecutors in the Trump administration recommended against charges against, say, a Democratic congressman or some Democratic target or another. And the senior political appointees at the DOJ in the Trump administration, had they overruled that and gone ahead with the prosecution, we would all be standing here saying, again, the career prosecutors are the ones who really know what's going on, and they'd be overruled by the political appointees. And can't you see this is politicization of the Department of Justice? So now they have to worry about that in the Justice Department. Now, do senior appointees in the Biden Justice Department say, yes, let's go ahead with this prosecution, knowing that the accusation from Republicans will then be that this is politicization of the Department of Justice? And to be quite honest about it, we would absolutely have made the same claim if the shoe was on the other foot. So this is a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit difficult. And but on the other hand, this is the interesting thing, is Republicans would do that anyway, knowing that we would accuse them of politicization, and they would just, say, no, you're the ones who are politicizing. And well, guess what it means is that once again, the rules apply when Democrats are in power and only when Democrats are in power. And is that really the way you want to conduct things? And is that itself structurally problematic, such that you might find that eventually it pays to break the mold and take the criticism, but send the people to jail when they deserve it, just to avoid being the laws never apply against Republicans, they only apply against Democrats, and trying to break that cycle? I don't know. Can't be answered here. But we can speculate. Here we go. Okay, let's get back to the reporting here. Senior department officials, haven't made their final decision, et cetera, but again, pretty rare to overrule the line prosecutors on this. Nevertheless, it is unlikely that federal authorities will charge Gates with a crime in this investigation that started in late 2020 and focused on his alleged involvement with a 17-year-old girl several years earlier. Gates, who is now 40, has repeatedly denied wrongdoing, saying he has never paid for sex. He also said the only time he had sex with a 17-year-old was when he was 17. You get it? He likes to talk about he has sex. I have my doubts, but he likes to say it. Gates' lawyer, Isabel Kirshner, declined to comment. A Justice Department spokesman declined to comment as well. Investigators set out to determine if the congressman paid for sex in violation of federal sex trafficking laws and have examined his dealings with the then 17-year-old. People familiar with the matter have said. Earlier this year, a federal grand jury in Orlando heard testimony from associates of Gates's, including an ex-girlfriend. The ex-girlfriend was among several women on a trip Gates allegedly took to the Bahamas in 2018 that has been of particular interest to investigators. The 17-year-old at issue in the investigation was also on that trip, though by that time she was already 18 or older. People familiar with the matter have said. She has been a central witness in the investigation, but people familiar with the case said she is one of two people whose testimony has issues that veteran prosecutors feel would not pass muster with a jury. Okay, well, she's not one of the traffickers. She would have been, if anything, one of the traffic head. But she, too, apparently has some credibility problems, which I think at this point are still left unknown for us. But you could imagine there could be any number of things. It's a very uncomfortable situation to be in. The other person with the credibility problems is a former friend of Gates's, Joel Greenberg. That's who I was thinking of. A former tax collector for Seminole County, Florida. He pleaded guilty last year to sex trafficking of a minor and a host of other crimes as part of a cooperation deal with authorities. Greenberg was first charged in 2020 with fabricating allegations and evidence to smear a political opponent, by the way. But prosecutors continued to investigate and added charges to his case. He ultimately agreed to plead guilty to 6 criminal charges, including sex trafficking of a child, which we're all focusing on, aggravated identity theft, and wire fraud. But perhaps it would be worth doubling back at some point and looking at the idea of his being in trouble for trying to, fabricate allegations and evidence to smear political opponents. In exchange for his guilty plea, prosecutors agreed to dismiss the other 27 counts Greenberg faced, so I guess we'll not get that investigation, and recommend a term within federal sentencing guidelines, which are often far less than the statutory maximum penalties. They also agreed to recommend other possible sentencing breaks. If Greenberg provided, quote, substantial assistance in building other cases, prosecutors might ask a judge to deviate below the minimum required penalty, according to Greenberg's plea agreement. His sentencing is scheduled for later this year. So, anyway, that'll make him doubly angry, I guess, if at any point, if he cooperates to this extent, but then, if the whole thing is contingent on securing a conviction against Gates, or anybody else for that matter, and then they don't get it, and he'll say, why did I bother to cooperate? Anyway, it was in exploring Greenberg's conduct that investigators came upon evidence potentially implicating Gates in sex trafficking. People familiar with the matter have said prosecutors have been exploring whether Greenberg paid women to have sex with Gates and whether the two shared sexual partners, including that 17-year-old girl at issue in Greenberg's case, these people said. Gates, who represents a mostly conservative district in Florida's Panhandle, is known as a strident defender of former President Donald Trump. The investigation into him was opened up during the Trump administration and proceeded with the approval of then Attorney General William Barr. So that's something to note as well. By the way, as I was reading the previous paragraph, exploring Green's conduct came upon evidence of potentially implicating Gates in sex trafficking, exploring whether Greenberg paid women to have sex with Gates. So what's Gates' excuse? I never paid to have sex with anybody. Yeah, I know. Greenberg paid them. That's worth pointing out in all of this. Anyway, Greenberg has been providing investigators with information about Gates since last year, according to a person familiar with the matter. Greenberg's credibility would be a significant challenge for any prosecution of Gates, in part because one of the crimes Greenberg admitted to was fabricating allegations against a school teacher who was running against him to be a tax collector. I had forgotten that part of the story, but I think when we originally read the story, that was a big part of it and a major reason we read it. And just a big shock in general. But yeah, you can see how that becomes a problem. Aren't you also guilty of fabricating evidence, though? I mean, you're here testifying against Matt Gaetz. How do we know we're not fabricating this evidence? And I don't know what the answer to that is, except now to say, they dropped the charges of fabricating evidence. Well, yeah, they dropped the charges of fabricating evidence because you agreed to give them Matt Gaetz. And one, you haven't. But two, wasn't it maybe your plan to give them Matt Gaetz by fabricating evidence against him? Well, that would be awfully foolish, given that I'd already been arrested for fabricating evidence. Maybe not. Right, well, that does pose a bit of a problem. Greenberg had sent letters to the school falsely claiming that the teacher had an inappropriate sexual relationship with a student, a similar allegation to the Gaetz case. Yeah, I guess that makes it easier to believe, right? Possibly. Nobody's going to believe anything that Joel Greenberg says by itself. His statements would need to be corroborated by testimony or evidence. David Baer, a lawyer for the school teacher, said on Friday. Greenberg also pleaded guilty to a host of other crimes, including stealing from the tax collector's office and defrauding a government loan program that provided relief for businesses affected by the coronavirus pandemic. The Gaetz case took an especially bizarre turn when authorities charged a Florida business executive with trying to extort the congressman's wealthy father as part of a scheme to secure a presidential pardon for the younger Gaetz amid the then ongoing sex trafficking probe. I'm not even sure I followed that all the way through. A business executive tried to extort the congressman's father as part of a scheme to secure a pardon for the younger Gaetz. How so? I don't even know. I don't know if I can follow that. The business executive, Stephen M. Alford, ultimately pleaded guilty in 2021 to wire fraud. Authorities say, maybe this explains it, he approached Gaetz's father, Don Gaetz, saying he could guarantee his son a pardon in the sex trafficking case as part of a convoluted $25 million scheme that also involved an effort to find a long-missing former FBI agent. Okay. Instead of paying him, Don Gates went to the FBI and secretly recorded the conversations. At least one person knows what to do when that happens. Last week, the Washington Post reported that Gates told a former White House aide, John McEntee, that he was seeking a preemptive pardon from Trump shortly before Trump left office. According to people familiar with McEntee's testimony to the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack, McEntee said Gates told him that while he had done nothing wrong, they are trying to make his life hell, and if the president could give him a pardon, that would be great. Gates said he had asked White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows for a pardon, McEntee testified, according to these people who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss his testimony. All right. Well, all of that would be very interesting to bring up in the trial, too. Well, yes, there's credibility problems with Greenberg, and I guess some with the girl as well. But on the other hand, we have the testimony of McEntee and maybe Meadows that he was out there seeking a pardon, and that's got to mean something, too. All right. Well, at any rate, that's the update on where we stand on the Gates thing. We'll see how that develops in the near future. All right. Definitely have a couple other things to share with you that I thought would be of interest. Now, do I go back to the pocket stuff, or I just saw another thing? Let me go to this maybe. An update or some more information on a story I brought you probably last week. I'm losing track of the weeks now. The Alabama Republican Party chairman, John Wall, who was challenged at the polls when he went to vote in a primary because he refused to show photo ID. You remember this one? And they ended up firing the poll worker who dared to ask him for his photo ID. And then there was some hint that he had some religious objection to even having photo ID or something. And maybe now we'll get some clarification on this, or at least some more further confusing information. But it's further, so there you go. Whether it's confusing or not doesn't matter. It's more information. Kyle Whitmire is tweeting this around, a columnist for the Alabama Media Group, which I guess is what is responsible for alabama.com. Kyle has this to say in his tweet thread and then some linked articles. Most of Alabama GOP chairman John Wall's extended family, I love to say GOP, delegitimize them as a party. Makes them sound dumb. Most of Alabama GOP chairman John Wall's extended family have been blocked from voting because they won't show photo ID. All right, boo-hoo, right? That's your law. In a 2016 deposition, his brother explained why. So this has been going on for a while. Why do they do this? Well, they consider photo ID, and I don't know why they do, but they do, I guess it's religious in nature, to be the mark of the beast foretold in Revelations. That sounds like calls for a horror dramatic. Well, foretold in Revelation, the singular. I don't know if that's the proper name for it or not, but at any rate, or maybe it's just a typo, but I get the idea here. And the article is attached here, but there's a tweet thread that goes along with this. So Kyle continues. By the way, you'll find Kyle Whitmire, I think I said Whitmore, but it's Whitmire, tweeting under the admirable handle of War on Dumb. So I could sign up on the War on Dumb. It seems kind of information, interesting. It's not information in itself. But anyway, I was distracted I'm looking at his Twitter bio here that says, I coined the phrase Alabamification of America, and it stuck. I'm not certain what it is, but it sounds like a pretty good phrase and probably fun and meaningful. Anyway, Kyle continues his tweet thread this way. John Wall has been able to vote, but in recent elections, the GOP chairman has used an unusual photo ID. We heard about this one before from the other article we read. An unusual photo ID that looks like it might be a state employee ID badge, but it's not. This is the one that says Regional Press Secretary, Office of the State Auditor. When one poll worker fussed about it, Wall leaned on local officials to remove the man as a poll worker. That's the story we read last week. However, his brother's deposition shows other poll workers had problems, and the conflicts at the polls began much earlier. So that is kind of interesting, isn't it? John Wall has accused overzealous poll workers of voter intimidation. But in a 2016 deposition, his brother said the law was the problem for giving poll workers the opportunity to discriminate against their family. How interesting. The GOP chairman's brother testified in a court challenge by Greater Birmingham Ministries. In that lawsuit, Joshua Wall gave a deposition and testified he had reached out to the NAACP, which was also a plaintiff, after he learned of the lawsuit. They're not black, these folks. But, okay, I mean, the NAACP making common cause. It's just very interesting. But once again, though, you know, I can't credit Republicans for coming around to this point of view when it finally targets them. You know, I don't know how vocal they were in opposing the law on its way through the Alabama legislature on the grounds that it would discriminate against white people too, you know. I mean, they could have gotten some mileage out of that in front of the Alabama legislature, I would think. Well, anyway, let's see. Some states have religious exemptions in their voter ID laws. I had never heard of it really up until recently. I mean, I guess you probably could have convinced me that, oh yeah, well, Pennsylvania, Ohio, maybe, places where there are significant Amish populations, maybe, you know, okay, sure. But anyway, some states have religious exemptions. Alabama is not one of them. In separate testimony in that court challenge, Alabama Secretary of State John Merrill said there was an effort to amend the Alabama law to include an exemption, but that effort failed. In the deposition, the GOP chairman's brother said that Merrill had been kind to his family in trying to help, but that it wasn't a permanent fix. There would be other secretaries of state, he said, and no guarantees that they'd help. When I spoke to Merrill, he said he would do the same for anyone in such a situation, but that the Walls problem in Limestone County were the only instances of this that he could think of. So it does call into question about, I guess, to some extent, the legitimacy of the religious exemption if you're the only one in the whole state and, you know, presumably you're not the only one practicing this religion in the whole state. But okay, maybe you are. When I spoke to Merrill, he said he would do the same for anyone. Oh, yes, right. But this is the only instance of this that he could think of. After the court challenge failed at the 11th Circuit, by the way, the Alabama GOP celebrated the victory on Twitter. A tweet John Wall shared, despite his brother being a witness for the other side, and of course him later becoming a victim of the very same law. Isn't that interesting? Here it is. John Wall retweeted. It's captured here. This is April 9th, 2021. ALGOP tweeting, a big win for fair elections in Alabama coming out of the U.S. 11th Circuit Court of Appeals today. The judge's ruling to uphold the state's voter ID law. So, you know, but John Wall being pretty happy about that for some reason back then. And one more thing, that proposed religious exemption failed after the sponsor said, here we go, this explains it. After the sponsor said it wouldn't apply to Muslims. Interesting. So it's interesting too that it still failed. I mean, I guess that was probably his way of saying, oh yeah, we're going to have a religious exemption, but just not for Muslims. Oh, well, in that case, I'll vote for the religious exemption, but it still didn't fly. That is interesting. And here an attached article proving the point. Alabama lawmaker proposes photo ID law amendment for religious objectors. But okay, it's pretty interesting. So what about this article in which it's explained what the religious opposition is? Alabama.com article just out now today. As a matter of fact, Alabama GOP chair's family believed voter ID was mark of the beast, brother said in deposition. That sounds kind of interesting. It's Kyle Whitmire's own writing here, and in an opinion column at that. But let's see what's up here. When Alabama's voter ID was before the state legislature, if I had come up with a hypothetical like the Wall family, the proponents of that bill would have rolled their eyes and told me to stop being ridiculous. And I don't know what I could have argued back. What about people who have a religious objection to having their pictures taken? Wouldn't photo ID leave them disenfranchised? Such a thing seems unlikely, and it would have been beyond most folks' imagination that just a few years later, a member of such a family, John Wall, could navigate Republican Party politics to become the state GOP chairman and speak in favor of the very law that has vexed members of his own family at the polls. If it were fiction, it would have to be satire because no one would believe it. And as I learned after spending 2 months digging into this story, filing public information requests, conducting interviews, querying online databases of public records, much of what I was looking for was sitting in a court file the whole time. For me, it was like deciphering all the hieroglyphics in Egypt, only for someone to hand me the Rosetta Stone after I was done. In 2015, John Wall's oldest brother, Joshua, approached the NAACP, which was fighting the photo ID law in court, and in February of 2016, he sat for a deposition, giving sworn testimony under oath about how the law had affected his family. The deposition and other records in the court file show that the Walls have struggled for years to vote in Limestone County, going back to 2014, the year voter ID became law in Alabama. John Wall said that he knew his brother took part in a deposition, but that was the extent of what he knew. I have no information on a deposition, he said. I was not there. I've never seen the deposition, so I have no comment. John Wall has said his extended family, which lives together on a farm west of Athens, has a background in Anabaptism, about which I know next to nothing, but okay. When asked by lawyers for the state, his brother Joshua said only that they were Christians, although he recognized that his beliefs were different from others. His objection to voter ID, Joshua Wall said, was that he believed all biometric information, including photos that could be used for facial recognition programs, to be the mark of the beast foretold in Revelation. Okay. In particular, I object to the biometric nature of IDs in Alabama, which started pursuant to the Real ID Act, Joshua Wall testified. And there's a passage in Revelations 12, plural there, Revelations 12, where it says that the forthcoming mark of the beast will be a number of a man, which means nothing to me. But biometrics, by its nature, is a number of a man. Is it? You know, that's what makes me uncomfortable, and that goes against my convictions, if they have anything to do with one another. Joshua Wall also testified that he did not have a social security number. Throughout his testimony, Joshua Wall said that his family generally shared his beliefs, but that they varied. Some of them do and some of them don't, he said when asked whether the rest believed photo IDs were the mark of the beast. Only one sibling had a photo ID, he said. He didn't say which one. Joshua Wall followed the bill as it passed through the legislature, and after it passed into law, his family attempted to use an exception to vote without ID. Under Alabama law, you can vote in if 2 elections officials sign an affidavit saying you don't have ID on your person and that they can positively identify you as a registered voter. Okay, that's interesting. In 2014, the Wall family was able to successfully do this once, but when they returned to the polls later that year, the poll workers rebuffed their requests. While the Walls expected poll workers to positively identify each of them as registered voters, in his deposition, Joshua Wall had trouble remembering those poll workers by name. He remembered the full name of one of the poll workers who had dealt with them, but could only remember the last name of the other. That's not too bad. He also testified that he learned later that sheriff's deputies had been called to the polling place, but he said their dispute with polling workers had not been hostile and that his family left without voting before those deputies arrived. By 2016, Alabama Secretary of State John Merrill intervened after a member of the Wall family reached out to him for help. Joshua Wall said he didn't know which member of their family had reached out, but Merrill has since told me that it was John Wall. Okay, I mean, that makes a certain amount of sense. In another deposition in that case, Merrill described the situation in Limestone County and explained the solution he had proposed, that the probate judge allow the Walls to meet the poll workers during a poll worker training session so that they could positively identify them on Election Day. Special treatment, but it would work, I guess. Joshua Wall testified that such a meeting had been scheduled, but it was canceled after the poll workers had apparently relented. Merrill also testified that he supported adding a religious exemption to voter ID laws in Alabama in February, but the bill adding such an exception, sponsored by State Representative Kerry Rich, died in the legislature and never became law after Rich said the exemption wouldn't apply to Muslims. I would have thought that would have increased support for it. For a time, Merrill's intervention worked. We know now that those poll workers moved on, and the Wall family incurred the same problems with new ones who came later. This week, Merrill told me that he would do the same for any voters in the Wall situation, but the Walls were the only ones that he knew of who were having this problem. All right, there's a little bit more here still. There's actually a considerable amount more. You might be interested in reading this. Justice Putnam might be interested in reading this, but of course, he's already set his agenda for the day. Maybe we can intervene and affect it. Let me tell you a little bit about it after this.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Okay, good. Thank goodness he'll be picking up on the Italian fascist prime minister situation there. Party elders have called the newly elected Italian fascist prime minister Giorgia Meloni the great heir to Il Duce, and they mean it like in a good way. So stay tuned for just to tell you why that is interesting.